hunting season, and there are idiots out there who are not paying a lot of attention, might see somebody's brown hair because that's all they can see for several reasons, and so they might try to pick somebody off, but they'll probably see the orange. So welcome to what was affectionately, or maybe not so affectionately, called the dump. So I got to tell you a little history like I have on just about any one of our outdoor field trips. So we're going back into the 70s again. And here again, I arrived in 1974 in the fall. And in the first town meeting in 1975, after I'd already been wiped out by the legislature with regard to removing gravel from the rivers of the state of Maine. I told you that long story, but I lost that one, 17 zip, because they didn't believe a word I had to say and decided that they should stop removal of gravel, and you know the rest of the story. It's another one of these examples. You can't do one thing, so they stopped the removal of gravel, and they end up losing 15 acres at David Pike's, a 12-acre island, 3 acres of land right down the river, and all of the agricultural things he was doing with that land, and there were many other instances of significant losses as a result of agricultural land being eaten up by pro-grading bars and cut banks big time based on the growth of gravel bars. But this wasn't gravel bars. This was the 1975 town meeting, my first one, and I arrived again thinking I was wearing a white hat, and the big item on that meeting was to accept a 50-acre piece of land, which we're looking at right here, 20 acres of which you can see. This cleared land is 20 acres. And then you got all the woods up in the top of the hill. And if we drove up there, don't need to do it, I'll tell you, as soon as we get past the first batch of a lot of limbs, tree limbs and stuff that are going to be burned eventually, or maybe chopped up, I don't know. But anyway, right after that is bedrock. And the whole ridge up there, the bedrock, is just like bedrock in most ridges. It's only a few inches below the soil. But this was supposed to be 50 acres of thick sand because of the fabulous pine trees, and we still have some of them, not many left, but pine trees love sand, and this whole entire area was all pine trees. Except down in there, where there's still some, but it's a swamp. And way up there, there are still some, but it's right on bedrock. How do you dig down there and bury stuff? Because the old dump on Route 43 headed out toward my house on the left-hand side, just before you turn left on Mosier Hill Road. You can, if you look carefully, you might actually see it. It's all grown over with trees. Peter Tracy, who was a forester, has been managing the woodlot on top of the old dump. The dump was just like most dumps were in the state of Maine back in the 1970s. You drive there most any day you want to, including Sundays, but particularly on Sunday because you'd have your 22 with you and you'd go shoot rats. What? Go shoot rats. There's rats all over the dump, and so if you want to have fun, you know, sighting in your 22, it's not a deer rifle. You're not shooting deer or bear, shooting rats. But anyway, it was usually on fire. People would take everything they had and throw it in this dump, and either someone would touch a match or chuck in a cigarette butt or something like that, and it would catch on fire, and it smoldered and burned, and that's what town dumps did. They didn't smell too good either. And they weren't that good for surface water. When it rained, it came down through all of the garbage and metal and stuff, poisons from somebody's medicine cabinet or whatever that were just thrown in there because that's where all the stuff went. There was no recycling. It was just a dump. And so the town was voting in 1975 to get rid of the dump and replace it with a landfill, quote unquote. So guess who stands up? I don't know anybody in town. They don't know me. And I say, I don't believe that we should vote for this this landfill to be built because they were voting to buy the 50 acres at about $50,000 or $1,000 an acre. But it was guaranteed it would last 50 years. So an acre per year would be used at the landfill. And we're standing on the landfill right now. But it was called pretty quickly the dump. Oh, you're going out to the dump? Well, it's not a dump. It's a landfill. And the landfill means that you basically dig some geometry of trenches and you put in all of the garbage every day that you're open, and then at the end of the day you cover it over with 6 inches of soil, typically or hopefully, let's say till or maybe clay soil, to keep the water from infiltrating. But it was in sand, and they were covering it with sand, so the water that came down and rainfall would just go right through this little cover of 6 inches of sand right into the garbage that was thrown away that day. But what it didn't have was a lot of paper and crap all over the place because of the winds blowing over here. That's what you get out of a dump. You throw stuff in the dump, the wind comes up that day, and all the newspapers in town that got chucked away are now in the trees and on the road, and it was a mess. And I didn't deny that that was the case. I said, look, a burning dump is not the most healthy situation you can think of, and it is polluting the environment in several different ways. But I think you're jumping into this because landfills are not a proven technology. They weren't, and I knew that. And so the vote, 300 people were there, 300 to 1. So that was kind of neat. I lost that one too. So I had my first year there, I lost to the legislature, I lost in Farmington. So the dump was procured for $50,000, pardon me, the landfill land, which you're looking at, was procured for $50,000. And I remember it well because this is all trees, and that was all trees, but they cut the trees down all along that area. And you see, by the way, as you look toward the mountains in the distance, on this land surface, you'll see a white plastic pipe that's not vertical. It seems to be kind of tipped over a little bit. If we took the time to walk over there, which we won't do, but it would be kind of fun to do it, you'll find on down the hill a bunch of pipes. We may actually take a look at it when we're done here. We're going to get down to the Sandy River Recycling Association, but they don't exist anymore. They basically went belly up on the 31st of June of this past year. So we could drive down and see their building. Well, the lights, notice the lights are on. I don't know who's paying for them because the SRRA, Sandy River Recycling Association, which lasted for somewhere around 23 or 27 years, I forget which it was. You could look it up. And we'll talk more about it down there. But they finally just went under, belly up. And the building is for sale, and the land includes a compost facility which we'll go visit. But we're back to here right now. So the very first thing they did was to cut the trees down on that side of this little road, which didn't exist. The road wasn't even here. And they built a trench going in that direction, parallel to those trees. And so people would drive in, throw their stuff in the trench, and turn around and come back out again. It wasn't really well planned, because you got a whole bunch of cars coming around the corner here, and then going in that way, and there's no place to go, so they kind of crash one another as they're coming out. Why do I remember it? Because the day that I die, I'll probably die based on my oldest daughter, Lauren, who's now 43 or 46 or something, choking me to death in my bed. I'll be sick in bed, and she'll come in and choke me, and that's the end of me. Why would she do that? Because her little dolly carriage, you know, she's got the little dolly thing, and it's got a doll in it, and you pull on something, and it goes, wah, wah, and it broke, and Dad couldn't fix it. It was cheap metal and stuff like that, so we took it to the dump. I made the mistake of bringing Lauren to the dump with me because she loved to go to the dump. So we pulled up. She didn't know what it was going to do. I took our garbage and threw it in the trench, and then I reached in and grabbed Dolly carriage, and I threw it in the trench, and boy, did I pay for that day, and I think I still am now that many years later, since 1974. I keep telling her the story and hope she won't kill me, but nonetheless, I mean, that was her favorite toy, but it was broken and I couldn't fix it. So then someone said, maybe we should change it, and we'll just make a long trench the entire length up to that big container way up there that's contains, oh my God, about 20 or 30,000 gallons, I suppose, of something, but up to those trees. And what happened was, the trench was as far over as you can imagine before it went downhill, but it didn't go downhill. And you drive along on this side of the trench, and you throw stuff in, you cover what's, they'd cover it at the end of the day, so the papers wouldn't blow around, and the packs of coyotes or any organisms wouldn't come in there, try to get the rats and eat them. But anyway, it would get covered over every day. And then you'd make your way up to all the full length, and then eventually when that trench was filled, they would cover the whole thing with more sand, pack it down best they could, and make it a road. Then you would go in on that road and you'd go up that direction, the trench being this side of the road. And then they do the same thing on this side of the road, and they worked all the way up to this place right here when they realized, oops, they were hitting bedrock right up where that road swings up. So they said, let's try something else. And so they started making trenches going this way, right up by that bundle of demolition debris up there on this side of it. That demolition debris is on bedrock, darn close to it. The soil was small with bedrock really close. But you come this way a little bit, it was quite deep. They were able to go down and make a 7-foot lift, meaning that they'd dig a trench 7 feet deep, and they would then go back and forth that way, filling it in, moving in this direction. And when they got all the way here, they had a 7-foot deep trench, the last of them. They filled that trench up, and then they went back up there again and started all over again. They started putting another 7 feet on top of the 7 feet of trash they already had. We're standing right now, right here, on 14 feet of trash. 2 7-foot lifts, we'll call it a lift. So a trench going this way all the way to those trees was 7 feet deep, and they piled it in, and then they piled on top of that, eventually, 7 feet more. So we get about 14 feet of household waste. So, so what we're talking about would actually be under the category of municipal solid waste, because it turns out that the way that you took care of your waste was to drive it here yourself and then dump it, and then you could hire a business to come and pick up your waste and then bring it here and dump it. So this whole area was a municipal solid waste landfill. So what was the landfill like? Well, when you had here 14 feet of trash covered by a foot or two of sand, and every time it rained, the water would go down through the sand, hit the trash, and go through it down to the bottom, which is bedrock. So 15 or 16 feet below us is bedrock. So, and the bedrock is rather impervious. We're on the top of a ridge. The bedrock is deep here, very shallow up there, obviously. You get to it very quickly. But what happens is you have water percolating down. Remember infiltration and percolation. When you do that hydrological thing, it infiltrated, easy, it's just sand. It's porous and permeable. It percolated down through all of the garbage and said, oh, look at some toxic stuff here. I'll grab it in my water molecule, and then over there you'll grab in something else. Well, wait a minute. Where are the batteries? I don't know. Everywhere. Where are the medicines from the medicine chest? I don't know. Where are the poisons from out in the barn? If you get a farm and you get all sorts of poisons you use to keep down poison ivy or to do whatever, I don't know. They're somewhere. We're, again, back to the car batteries, back to anything that you can imagine pulling out of your house, your bathroom cabinet with the medicines in it, or out of your local your garage, or stuff you bought liquids a while ago to pump them on something to help. Either they were maybe some type of sides, and you get lots of, you got herbicides, and you got pesticides, and you got rodenticides, and you get a lot of sides. They're not spelled S-I-D-E-S, I might say, but just toxic materials. And you buy some and you use it, and then you put it in the garage, and then eventually someone says, hey, check that away, we don't need it anymore. Where does it go? To the dump. We have no idea where anything is here, with the exception that I know over the hill toward that really nice first birch tree, somewhere in that vicinity, enormous amounts of dowels from the main dowel company, which is no longer in existence, but they would bring up all the used dowels, and I'd have my pickup truck just waiting, because as soon as they dumped those dowels out, I was in there shoveling dowels into my pickup truck to use for kindling for my house, because we heat the house, or heated it with wood, mostly, and all the time back then, but now I'm using my mini split air-to-air heat pump, and it's doing a really nice job. But it was blowing 40 to 50 miles an hour a couple of days ago, and my heat pump was suffering. At 20 below zero, it didn't suffer, but it was, and what by suffering, I mean our house is a little bit not sealed up yet for Christmas, for the fall, for the winter. It came too fast. So we didn't close all of the windows tightly, and we did, so you could, and when that wind was blowing, Yeah, the mini split was keeping a portion of the house nice and warm, but it wasn't doing what a fire would do, so I lit a fire. I had my first burn, probably maybe the only one for the entire year coming up, simply because the house will be all tightened up. But nonetheless, I needed kindling, and that's where I got it. And so there's tons and tons of dowels from the, they use the dowels to make something, and then they chip off all the ends and they throw it all away. And trucks would come up here from anywhere, throwing stuff away. Metal, plastic, toxic stuff. No one knows where it is. So, don't write this down wrong, but get it first and then write it any way you want to. The most dangerous landfills in the United States, in Maine for sure, the most dangerous and most toxic landfills in terms of the possibility of contaminating groundwater and poisoning people are or were, because they're almost all gone now, were the municipal landfills just like this. There are special landfills up in the Hampton area, near Bangor, over in Norwalk, which is where the materials here that it's now a transfer station, get transferred to Norwalk, and in many cases they would then get sent away from Norwalk to other places, like even New Hampshire, and vice versa. So not really clear where all of the stuff that comes to our landfills that are no longer municipal landfills, but they're very expensive, very protective landfills that have a significant clay liner at the bottom, tens of feet in some cases of solid clay, covered with some type of a fabric, a geofabric that won't let fluids go through it, plastic, if you will, and it's not your typical thin plastic, but heavy gauge plastic. Here again, we want to get rid of plastic bottles. It